Wonder Woman Historia, The Amazons, by Kelly Sue DeConnick and Phil Jimenez, cover by Romulo Fajardo Jr. and Phil Jimenez, colored by Hi-Fi, Romulo Fajardo Jr. and Arif Pirianto. I think that's how you pronounce it. Released November 30th, 2021, published by DC Comics. The history of Wonder Woman, at least in the real world, is a unique one. The creator is someone who invented the lie detector, or had a big hand in it, though it neither detects lies nor confirms truth, and was in a progressive kind of relationship during his time, having both a wife and what you would call an open mistress, a polyamorous relationship. Thus, the creation of Wonder Woman is unique. But upon listening to overly sarcastic productions on their rundown on history and myths in general, I have to say that this book does perpetuate a lot of the misinformation that we know about the Greek pantheons, in that a lot of what we know is more modern than one would think. So one can ask, is Kelly Sue DeConnick, legendary writer she may be, would it be wrong to expect a little bit more research to be done on her part? Do the YouTube thing, feed the algorithm, and let's talk about this. Now, mostly listening to overly sarcastic productions, to be honest, and my own readings of certain Greek myths, it is safe to say that very much like the Hans Christian Andersen versions of fairy tales that we know about, Greek myths have been very much wholly watered down and changed throughout the years, and many aspects such as Hades being the bad guy and Zeus being the good guy are simply things that everybody quote-unquote knows, but really it's something that we've been told so many times that we think it's true, and it really is that we don't know, or we were just plain wrong. This book is confusing, to say at the very least, and certainly not suited for the digital version that's presented on Comixology. It is a problem if I can only view it panel by panel, or view the whole thing without zooming in and out. It just doesn't work as well. Now, this book, because it focuses on the inaccurate tropes of the Greek gods, it certainly takes away from it. And if you know the tropes are inaccurate, and certainly that was the case for me, basically, in a brief summary, the Amazons were created by the female gods of the Greek pantheon, sans Hera for reasons, resulting in the various tribes of the Amazons, to which we learn that Hippolyta, the canonical queen of the Amazons, both in the DC universe and in Greek lore, starts out as some sort of lowly servant or slave, and somehow rises up to be queen, which is inferred by the last page. Black and white and color. So, this is a wonderfully colored comic. There is no doubt about that at all. Vibrant colors, each panel holds a painting that you would very much talk about in a smart manner at an art gallery. If you are an art snob, you might enjoy this. And yes, it was a backhanded compliment. But that being said, I do like the art, so this gets a star plus. So, paneling and expression. I can't say that I enjoyed the paneling. I mean it when I said that each panel holds a painting, but that's kind of the problem with it. Comics just can't have good pictures. It needs to be paneled in a way that helps the story. If my eyes are wandering because the pictures and all the panels all fight for attention, it kind of takes away from the page as a whole. The pictures can stand alone, but they have to work together in like some sort of picture Voltron, and I don't think this achieved that picture Voltron in a lot of the pages, so I give it a star just for the art and because it does have panels, but that's about it. Character and dialogue. There is character, there is dialogue. I didn't really find it riveting at all. It felt more like exposition of anything else. There really isn't a character to be invested in, even though we see a lot of different depictions of the pantheon, and some are very novel takes. There really isn't anything here that showcases what kind of character they are. A lot of it's like subtle and inference almost, but again, not really. And also within the context of the DC universe, this kind of fights against the already set canon, though let's face it, that's pretty much the history of the DC universe, or rather, any comic book universe. So this gets a star. I'll talk a little bit more about it in the conclusion. The theme for Wonder Woman usually involves feminist themes. This is unavoidable as the character was created for that very reason, though in some ironic ways it also placates to certain aspects of society that deem things feminine, but that being said, it is a unique lens in which superheroes at the time and often to this day don't really delve into. But we also have the background of the Greek pantheon, and considering all the dramas and plays that have survived to the modern day, we know that there are already a lot of themes to play around with and in that stage, and certainly to play around with today. And I don't think this book utilized the rich playground of drama of the Greek gods as well it could have. So for this, I am not going to give it a star, especially since it seems to ignore the plain history of the Greek pantheon in favor for some pop culture interpretation. Again, I'll elaborate in the conclusion. Plot and execution. The plot is basic. Goddesses have beef with men, stage a sort of rebellion by creating the tribes of the Amazons, except for Hera, again for some reason, even though she's the goddess that brought the complaint to Zeus in the first place. And then we follow Hippolyta, who chases an abandoned baby for some sort of reason. Kind of seems like on the edge of mania or anxiety or something along those lines. And she is found by the heads of the 6 tribes of the Amazons, who give her gifts because they know that she would be their queen. So not much of a plot. If anything, this is just the prologue, but no stars. Again, discuss in the conclusion. Conclusion. 4 stars. It would have been great if the writing was up to par along with the art, but in my opinion, the art simply outclasses the writing. My main issue is that it seems that the writer either purposely ignored what is actually known about the Greek pantheon in lieu of a pop culture version, which is inaccurate and many times misleading about who the gods actually were or what they were like, or the writer doesn't know anything about the Greek pantheon, thus relying on pop culture versions. In both cases, we end up with the very same thing. I'm open-minded enough to think that maybe she was just taking it into a different direction, but this is the implication that I find. You could be thinking, who cares? It's just a story. You can change anything you want in your story, and that is true. But in my own personal view, the better grasp you have on history and the context in which you place your story, the more layered and polished it is. And the more layers and polish you put on your story while engaging your audience still, the better it is. Now, the Greek gods, if I remember correctly, were depicted as fallible in that they had faults and mistakes. For example, Athena, a goddess of war, but also of wisdom and handicrafts. And, if I could look it up on Wikipedia, I can confirm it through independent sources, such as references found on the Wikipedia page and various other sources. Needless to say that the writer could have done so as well. Now, Athena has been shown in her ancient Greek depictions as someone who is unmatched by any gods in the areas that she is the god of. In this case, war, wisdom, and handicrafts. But she was also very petty. After all, the story of Arcane that shows that she turned a woman who beat her in a weaving match into a spider or something along those lines, and sometimes the story would be after the woman killed herself because she's that petty. Or the one where they had an argument about who is the fairest one of them all, between the 3 goddesses of Hera and Aphrodite along with her. The whole thing involved a golden apple that was supposed to go to the fairest one, and the guy who ended up giving the apple to Aphrodite because Aphrodite told him that she was going to help him get together with the prettiest woman in the world, who also happened to be married. If you are familiar with the story, you will realize that's what started the Trojan War, at least according to that myth, in which, that whole war, according to the stories, is where, gods would choose their favorites, mess around with the mortals. In one depiction, with Athena again, she punished a priestess of hers who was raped by Poseidon. So she basically victim blamed the priestess and turned her into Medusa. Needless to say, any goddess who is the patron goddess of a city would probably have a hard time coming to the conclusion that they, had enough of the men, right? And the funny thing is that there is a perfect story to set this fictional history of the Amazons. Isle of Lesbos, totally a thing, where we get the word lesbian from. The Amazons were a real thing, and, famously they chopped off half their cleavage in order to pull a bow better. There is even a drama or story in which a war was prevented by women by withholding the quote-unquote to know in the biblical sense from men. Greek story, adopted into Chirac, I think, in a film. All part of the whole feminist thing, and certainly appropriate for this story. So, why forego all of that for some basic level pop culture understanding? I mean, I could go on and on. For example, Artemis being depicted as a preteen young child, which is kind of odd and only makes sense if you focus on the aspect that she was made eternally young by Zeus and only that. In fact, many of these goddesses are shown to be like this one-note goddesses, but in fact, goddesses and gods of the Greek pantheon held multiple roles. So, in brief, here are the goddesses who are in the book, but their actual depictions in, Greek mythology. First one is Demeter, goddess of the grain, agriculture, harvest, growth, nourishment, and sacred law. Hestia, one of 3 virgin goddesses. She is the goddess of the hearth, home, domesticity, chastity, and the state. Hecate, a chthonic deity of magic, witchcraft, the night, moon, ghosts, and necromancy. Though her history is pretty ambiguous, and why she was chosen outside the Big 12 pantheon is kind of a mystery here, considering she wasn't that big. Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty, love, desire, and pleasure, and this is more of the Greek version of love, specifically focusing on the Eros kind. Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, wilderness, wild animals, the moon, and chastity. She is one of the 3 virgin goddesses, the second one mentioned on this list, also the protector of young children and women. Athena, as mentioned before, goddess of reason, wisdom, intelligence, skill, peace, warfare, battle strategy, and handicrafts. Also the 3rd of the virgin goddesses. Lastly, we have Hera, queen of the gods and goddesses, goddess of women, marriage, childbirth, heirs, kings, and empires. Also the goddess of the sky along with Zeus. So, why stick to simple depictions when clearly the pantheon is very much complex? But then again, I don't know if DC pays the writers for extra complexity within their stories. So again, within this entire book, and it is a pretty hefty book for a DC comic book, with 54 pages of amazing pictures, it is a book that simply looks pretty but has little underneath, which is a bit of an irony here. Now, you can enjoy the book, but that doesn't mean, 1, it has an accurate portrayal of the Greek pantheon, and 2, it has a deep portrayal or drama within the story presented. Simply, it somewhat fails on the fundamental level of readability. That, plus the lackluster story, as when compared with the art, makes something that could have been a knockout of a project into something that a lot of people will critique harshly, and that's not even counting the hyperbolic vitriol of the social media world and the internet. It could have used more polished, and Even if it doesn't do gangbusters in book sales right away, which is usually the goal, it could have been a sleeper hit, as word of mouth can still be a powerful tool, even in this day and age. There are things that people can latch onto if it was a deeper kind of book, but it's just a superficial understanding. So I ask the question again, is it too much to ask for something a little bit deeper and a little bit more polished as far as the story is concerned? Thank you for listening to this point. This one went a little bit longer than I have planned, but thank you once again for listening. I hope you are having a good day or good evening. Ciao, everybody.